back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting company here in New York City. Today, I am privileged to have Anthony Brannan of Metro Mechanical. Anthony, thanks for coming in. Anthony and I met many years ago through some family friends, and lo and behold, as it is in the construction world, we know a lot of people that we work with together. We've worked together on some projects. Anthony is a real estate developer and mechanical contractor, and I've asked Anthony to come in today to talk to us a little bit about the explosion of the energy code and how it's affected your business over the last few years, and give us a little insight on what he feels may be happening in the future. So, Anthony, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. So Anthony, we went from a world of affordable housing, which you do a lot of, and we share a lot of the same clients where, years ago we had a PTAC unit. We cut a hole in the wall. We made an opening. Yeah. It was self-contained. They ran some wire. They ran some gas, and they were in business. So today, because of the energy code, we're starting to create different types of systems. So, obviously the popular system is to go to split units. So tell us a little bit about how that's changed, how it's impacted the cost. It sounds easier, but it sounds like we got a lot more equipment, a lot more wiring, a lot more things. So, give the audience a little bit, what you're seeing in the new designs.
So I guess as far as new designs in the affordable market, for a very long time, most of all the projects were PTACs. It was pretty basic, simple, and a little bit more affordable than the things that we're doing today to save energy, obviously. Just a few years back, when the energy code got a little stronger here, especially in New York City, a lot of the buildings that we were designing just couldn't make the energy code compliant. So obviously, and more so with the PTACs, it's not just the efficiency of how the unit operates, it's how the PTAC affects the facade of the building.
Right, because it has so many openings.
Has so many openings, there's so much square footage.
And there's leakage.
There's a lot of leakage when you do your calculations. But the other side of the equation is now from a cost underwriting standpoint.
Right.
When you're trying to get some of these buildings developed and you're underwriting all the costs to build these buildings, now the costs have increased significantly with respect to just that, because the equipment's more expensive, the installation is more expensive, and but it is more efficient.
Right. So the podcast show before yours, an engineer was here, a wonderful woman by the name of Gabrielle Benazzi. And Gabrielle's firm does controlled inspections. Yeah. Great people, her and her husband, Greg. And, she was saying that, it's funny how the PTAC unit used to have a plumber running all the drains. Well, the mechanical guy ran the drains, but the plumber ran all the gas. All of a sudden, they cut the plumber out.
Right.
You're talking about thousands of jobs or man hours on a job where, plumbers and a helper were running gas lines. All of a sudden, you took that away from them, but you gave it all to the electrician. So you say, well, was the electrical more expensive or was the plumbing more expensive? And, one of the big markets right now, Anthony, that our firm specializes in, and it's a really complex one where we're taking an office building and we're going to make apartments. And it's office to residential conversion. We're using antiquated codes because it's still the multiple dwelling law.
Right.
1960s, Article 7B. And they're now going to some places go back to, old school kind of mechanical systems, but some of them are going to go to these condenser farms, right? And you're looking at these things and you're weighing the options and you're saying to yourself, they're going to get energy efficient. There's no question. But on the ones that are existing buildings, which I'm sure you're going to probably tell me a great story about a building that's existing and you want to convert and they want to be energy efficient so that in 2030 they're not hit with big penalties. They bite the bullet now. And when they bite the bullet now, the first things that we're hearing from developers, well, how long is Con Ed going to get me power? I need to increase my power in my building so much more than before. Before I had a little 110 motor in my PATAC unit. Now I got condensers and this and that. I want to separate my meters so they can pay their own heat. I want to do this. So we got electrical problems. We then have occupied buildings. We got tenant protection laws. We can't be in the apartments. How do we physically pull all this stuff out and put these new units in? And then, as we said off the air, do I have enough room on the roof to put all these units? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that complexity of how great, it sounds like a grandeur idea, but someone like you that's in the trenches building it, tell us a little bit about the obstacles that you're having on these type of conversions.
Well, you also compound that with the phasing out of gas.
Right.
So that just doubles down on the electrical consumption because now you're talking about hot water, cooking,
everything,
washer dryers, and now heating and cooling.
Right.
So now a lot of these apartments from a standard 60 amp service for like a basic apartment now is just about 200 amps.
Right. You remember we used to have those little old boxes with the buttons?
Yeah.
There's building that still have them.
Yeah.
And now you like you said, you didn't think about washer dry. You didn't think about that small hot water heater. They're all going to have little self-sufficient. They'll be like almost little self-sufficient apartments.
Yes, and that's kind of the way it's going. I mean, one of the buildings that I was involved developing out in Queens a couple of years back when there was the gas embargo, we made a decision just to say, hey, let's just go away from the gas and let's just go all electric and see how this is going to be. And it worked out really well, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we
needed to increase the service coming into the
the
building.
load's got to be larger, but even the code recognized it too, because when we were running the gas piping in the apartments, we then had a rate. We had a rate around the pipe. Well, you don't think of it, but you got a 60-story building with a gas riser. You got a lot of ratings to go all the way up a structure where they said, okay, well, we're just going to go electric. We're going to save all of that. So there are some cost savings here and there. My bigger concern is, do you think that because the units have gotten so much better that they can take the cold temperature in the winters but yet still satisfy the cooling in the summer? That was always the knock on those type of units. But from everything we read, you do it. Do you get a lot of calls back that the units aren't working the way they should?
I've been doing this type of work for a little over 25 years, and the technology that we have today is light years compared to the way it was. Heat pumps were never truly designed to be
in the Northeast. Right, they were down south.
Anytime the temperature would drop below 40, the efficiency of the unit would drop dramatically.
Right.
And getting down to 30 would really drop
forget it if you got to 20 or 15.
So it was a tough sell. Never as a primary source, always secondary or an auxiliary heat source. It was great.
So if the temperature went down to below, you kicked on your boiler.
And if your boiler failed for some reason, you were able to get something.
Right.
Just maybe not the amount of
but
capacity you needed, but I guess you wouldn't freeze. And then over the years, the technology's come a long way. And it's a very competitive market right now because there were like two really strong players in the market for a very long time. Mitsubishi and Daikin.
Right.
Daikin was always very strong in the larger scale projects, in the bigger buildings. And
but now I actually put them in my country place, and I've been extremely happy with them. And when you go to Europe, they're everywhere in the smaller scale.
Everywhere. Yeah, I've done some very high end residential buildings down in Dumbo and in Manhattan with all that equipment and heating and cooling and fully electric buildings and. Everything's been working fine.
So the trick there was when the temperature drops, now they're efficient enough to take that 15-degree temperature and still be able to provide the comfort zone for the tenants or for the.
There's equipment out there right now that at 0 degrees outside loses no efficiency whatsoever.
Wow.
So that's the benefit now. So
And now, in terms of the consumption of electricity, are they expensive to run?
well,
But because they're so much more efficient, it evens itself out.
in the coldest months, right? You would say maybe they are not as efficient as they would be 10 other months of the year.
Right.
Which, when you blend it out over an entire year,
It's nothing.
it's nothing.
It's nothing.
So a lot of people might say, well, in a very cold day, it's using
Yeah.
the most power that it possibly
But that's
can
the same
use.
truth of fossil fuel, because on a
Correct.
really cold day, that boiler's running a lot more than it is when it's not so cold.
Well, the other thing about the equipment that a lot of people don't understand is it's not just on or off.
Right.
Okay, so the technology is sensing so many different things. It's sensing outdoor temperature, it's sensing room temperature, sensing return air temperature, sensing supply air temperature.
Right, so-
and then all of that information is determining how fast the fan speed is, how much the compressor is being used, because a lot of those compressors could run down to only 10% of the total consumption when it's satisfied or reached close to its set point. Whereas, years back, you had an
was
air
either
conditioner
all
that
on
cycled
or all off.
on or off,
That's
on
it.
or off, and that's the beauty of
So
it.
that's the beauty. So as we go forward, a lot of buildings now, we can't put gas in already, right? And
Yes.
in the next couple of years, we're going to be completely shut off. One of the biggest concerns that a lot of developers come to us, and we're in the plan approval business. We're not in we're not in the electricity business, but they all ask us to say, so have you heard anything? What are they doing with the infrastructure? How are we going to get the load we need? And there are a lot of nightmares with our buildings being done and being promised that they're going to have the load. And we can't test the elevators. We can't bump the equipment in your world.
Yeah.
And they're calling me, well, I need my C of O. I need my C of O. I need my C. Well, we don't have permanent power. We're trying to test units with temporary power. We're bringing in generators. That doesn't work the way it's supposed to. We could bump them to see that they're working, but we can't balance the systems. We can't get our sign-offs from the controlled inspections labs for mechanical ventilation, for all those things. So, and also now, as a developer, you're on the other side of that. Not only are you doing the mechanical, but you're involved in building buildings. What do you feel developers in New York City, are they concerned about, not having the infrastructure to use all this equipment in the future?
Well, I think a lot of people are also getting away from gas because gas became a very delicate subject in New York City over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So, piggybacking on what you said earlier about, hey, the plumber lost a lot of work doing the work that he was doing on the P-Tax. Now they're losing all the gas infrastructure work on a lot of these buildings that no longer exists. So most of all the new buildings that we're working on don't have gas at all. No gas service at all.
Anthony, the new cycle that we did for the 421A from last year, that it's going to be coming up in 2026, they're all electric.
Yeah.
Well, but first of all, they were afraid they couldn't, even if they wanted to go gas, even if they put the load in, they weren't sure that Con Ed would bring them the load. Because they're like, hey, look, we're not going to upgrade our gas to give you extra load. This is what we got. If you make it work, you work. And they just decided, the engineers said, look, we're gonna find a way, especially in new construction, you can make the farm. The problem that we see is, like you said, when you have a residential building that went to condos, right? And they got a smaller rooftop, they got amenities on the roof. Where can you put these farms? So in lieu of that, what other systems are you seeing that they're doing to try to meet this energy code without fossil fuel? Is there other options?
Unfortunately, there aren't many options, especially in new construction. There's not really many options because if you want air conditioning, you still want heating.
Right.
So you only have a choice. And it seems that that's where everything's being corralled down. You get heating and cooling from the same unit. And if you wanted to do something completely different, you would have to decide, well, I don't want either one or the other.
Right.
So, and you need both.
You need both.
So if you said, hey, I don't need air conditioning, but we just want to provide heat, what are your options?
Right.
Right? Gas-fired boiler.
Right. Or electrical baseboards.
Or electrical baseboards.
And which is so inefficient.
Which are inefficient. So these systems have created a balance between the both worlds where they can be efficient in both ways.
And what I always appreciate about bringing subject matter experts in is that we get the ability for me to learn something, right? So I learned today that it's not on and off. And I always wondered when I'm up in my country house and I'm sitting there and I hear this unit running and I hear it beeping and that's because all the sensors are figuring out what the temperature is of the return air is, what the fan's blowing, what the condenser's doing. So it's actually like a mini computer in there. Analyzing all that. And it's funny that I had a problem with the unit. And this guy came, he was my age, and he comes over and he looks at it, he goes, well, I'm not a computer guy. There's nothing physically broke. I'll have to call the young kid to come take a look at it because it was just basically a computer. And he plugs, the kid came, he plugged something in, he ran a diagnostic. He said, look, it looks like the motherboard blew out. It's under warranty. We'll put a new motherboard in.
Most of our guys now have to run around with laptops and tablets because in order to get proper warranties on equipment, we need to have the units actually cycle for a period of time, download the entire 30-minute, and download it and actually email it directly to the factory.
You upload it to the factory, they decide.
They analyze it. They analyze the efficiency of the entire system and how it's running, and then they'll determine whether or not they know the job was installed properly, the unit's cycling properly, and if it's not, you're not getting your warranty. But if it is, you're getting it.
You know, it's funny, Anthony. You know, we're friends, right? And I always, I'm in the industry for 40 years almost, and I'll say to somebody, who did your mechanical work, and they say, oh, Metro, Anthony Brannan, and I can say this honestly, they always say the same thing, and it is an incredible compliment to you, and I could say it on air because that's how good it is. He goes, if you want it done right, and you want it done as clean and as professional as it should be, Metro Mechanical is the place to go. And I say that to you not because you're my friend.
Yeah,
now,
thank you. I appreciate it.
There's always things that come with that. And that's where in every business, for you to be that meticulous, for you to have that quality control, it costs money.
Yeah, sure.
You can't be a hack. You can't bypass things. When you do a drain, it's got to be done right. It's supported right. It's connected right.
Insulated.
That unit
insulated right.
Insulated. All of those things. So when you're building a building over time, people can take shortcuts all over the place. But today, with computers, with all the things, you can't be a hack anymore. No. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work in any business. So if there's, one thing that I can say, your reputation around New York City is that your firm and your staff do an incredible job of making sure the job's done right. And that's the best compliment anyone can say. So we go forward and we keep looking at this stuff, and one of the models that, I have is I want to build a little place up in the country for the kids on the lake. Mm-hmm. And the first time I made a mistake. I did the PTAC units. I did an inline hot water heater, which we love, works great. But I didn't do a solar roof because I could have went 100% electric. But now we're going to build a little cabin, and this time around I'm going to do we were not going to worry about propane. We're not going to worry about any fossil fuel. And it's the right fitting for the right set. Is there a way that in the future do you think that more and more buildings can get self-sufficient in New York City, or is it just the footprints aren't big enough?
So I completed a couple of projects in Manhattan on some very old buildings. I think I mentioned it to you earlier. On the west side, we converted a building that had a boiler that looked like the machine room of the Titanic. It was
like a school.
It looked like.
Do you remember when we were in?
It was about 3 stories high underground, and there was 2 monster boilers. It's a 22-story building, so there was quite a few.
They were boiling water
and we converted the entire building, and they took that space and converted into so much amenity space for the building.
And
they created bicycle storage,
Right.
regular storage, gym, conference rooms,
Right.
so many things.
Well, they got all that square footage back.
They picked all that square footage up. Obviously, it took up some of the roof, and some of those shafts that I explained to you that we needed to use, but.
But they
it was a
recouped
little
it.
bit of a meticulous job, because when you're working in a building that has tenants and you're working
Sure, we
around
said that at the beginning of the
hallways
show,
and so
yep.
on and so, it's a little bit tough. But the struggle is worth the finished product, because then
doubt.
at the end you converted a building that didn't have the metering in place. Right. So you were able to have now tenant metering for
Correct,
heating,
especially if they're
cooling.
condos.
Yeah. So there's a lot of
pros.
a lot of pros, but just a lot of pain to go through to get there.
But it's not it's not an inexpensive pain. It's an expensive pain. It costs money to put in this infrastructure, because in reality, you're taking outdated mechanical equipment. You got to remove it. You may have asbestos on it. You got cleanup. You got a lot of work. But in the future, the value of those apartments went up because they're modern now. They're not the Class C, Class D apartment. They're a Class A apartment now. And it's funny, one of the seminars that I went to, which is going to be, hopefully get some steam, but and we're working on a few of them. One's like 80,000, one's 200,000. We have a couple other bids in for now for some other projects, and we seem to be the go-to firm because we know the building, the multiple dwelling law.
Sure.
And we know a lot about the zoning. Is these office to residential? And to me, I never understood it. And one developer said it will revolutionize New York City living. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, just think about it, Sisto. He goes, go to your friend's house who lives on the Upper East Side, and they have an apartment that's got an 8'3" ceiling. He goes, when we do these conversions, every building has an 11-foot ceiling from slab to the bottom of steel. We got all this room that we can put any kind of mechanical system. We could put air handlers back in and go back to the farms upstairs, but we don't have to do it the way we were doing it before, right? And he goes, we got bigger windows. He goes, we're removing all the mechanical systems on the 10th floor. Those all become amenity spaces. People have gyms on the 10th floor that used to be boiler rooms. Then now we're putting in big gyms. We're putting workstations in. We're making conference spaces. So, I didn't think of it that way, but he's right. The apartments are going to be beautiful. The problem that they're going to be is they're going to be all for people that can afford big, fancy, high-rise apartments in Manhattan. We're not fixing the affordable problem, because those aren't going to be affordable units. They're going to be high-end luxury because they got bigger windows and they got higher ceilings. But you're right. A lot of times you're going to pull that cooling tower out on the roof, and you're going to pull all those big air handlers out. Now you got all this space that you got back. And in real estate in New York City, that's really, really a big deal.
If you think about how much square footage is today in New York City, right? And to me, that's what it's all about. I'm on projects sometimes, and we're fighting for like an inch of ceiling height. I mean, literally an inch of ceiling height. And they're like, no, you got to figure out how to get that pipe up a little tighter. And I'm like,
right.
How tight can we get? No, we got to have that ceiling height. And,
it's the difference.
Every shaft is really perfectly measured to fit the exact amount of, because nobody wants to lose, not a square foot. They don't want to lose a square inch.
Listen, we've had conversations, even zoning recognized it as they're part of Local Law 97 with the facades. If you beef up the insulation, they actually give you that square footage back.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you're talking about this much, but people don't realize 4 inches times the perimeter on every floor times the, 30 stories,
sure.
It turns into almost, whatever it is, you get that back. But at least they understood that if you're going to spend the money to do this facade, at least you got your floor area back that you can add it somewhere and get some
value.
Space and get value back.
Because at the end of the day, everything is always sold by the square foot.
Sold by the square foot.
If you could add 10 square feet on every floor and 20 stories, you're going to pick up some extra money to help coincide what it costs you to do all that insulating and all that other stuff that you're doing.
Of course. So, Anthony, one of the big things that we talk about on the show is a really dear friend of mine. He gets quoted on the show all the time. He owes me a big one. His name is Andrew Peters. He works for Curry and Brown, and he's a cost estimator.
Okay.
And he does a lot of institutional work, corporate work, where people say, "Hey, we're going to put a new library on the college," and his job is to tell them, based on a concept, not even a set of plans yet, how much it's going to cost. And I always say, you got the toughest job, but his job is to tell them, hey, it's going to cost roughly about this much. This is what you need to fundraise. This is what you're going to cost. And then they say, well, we don't know if we're going to build it 3 or 4 years from now. And he's got to kind of guess at all those things, right? And at the end of the day, he has a saying. He goes, everybody wants to look in the rearview mirror and say, well, the last one we did cost us, $700 a square foot. Right. And his job is to say, no, you'll never do it for that because of this, this, and this. So his saying is, we always got to look forward, never in the rearview mirror. Sure. So I'm going to ask you, as my guest, which everyone on the show, so I don't single anybody out and I don't put anybody on the spot, but one of the big things is pipeline. What do you forecast in the development world as well as the mechanical world? There's no 421A right now. That's a big part of our business, big part of your business. The office to residential conversion's getting some traction, but it's not as much as they thought because they thought everybody was going to jump in and do this. And now developers are realizing that if you don't have a niche, this could get really expensive and you could lose your shirt.
Well, there's a timeline involved with that too. So.
Right. Everything has a timeline. We don't have a new 421A, so we're not bidding jobs. You're not bidding jobs because there's none to be had. The date, they didn't extend the date to have these stalled projects because we got sites, you got sites that you were supposed to build and they pulled the plug on them and we're waiting for somebody else to buy them. Well, if they don't extend the date, they're not going to build them. So, what do you think the pipeline will be? Because I know we all have work now and next year, but 2026, 2027, in our world, it's nothing.
Well, there are still some small pockets here in the city that a developer could, put together a project and make it work, but it's going to be a niche project.
Like condos?
Like we just finished a project on Park Avenue and 79th Street, about a block off the park. It was a brand new building, 19 stories, and a beautiful building. And we also did the entire building all electric.
Right.
Okay, and we did all the heat pumps, air conditioning and heating, all ducted systems, and obviously that type of project maybe can still work because at that top level,
condos,
there's still
those
there's
opportunities,
still
right? And we have a few of those too,
right?
But the bulk of
the middle ground,
stuff
there
is
anymore.
The affordable stuff is still there. You bidding it, we bid it, we still get, but even that market got tight because a lot of GCs that never did affordable, they're trying to jump in that market, right? So we work with a lot of the same contractors, Bruno Frastacci, Monadnock, Mega, we're all in the same world because we know that world. We're competitive in that world because we've been doing it for 30 years. I've been doing it for 30. So we know what it takes to get those jobs. We know the obstacles. We know what it's like dealing with, government-funded projects. That market's still there. But the problem is that they take forever to get going because they got to get the property, they got to get the grants, they got to get the funding. So, I think that market's going to be around, but definitely the condo market is still pretty prevalent, but the 421As hit our firm and a lot of people.
Hit everybody hard.
Yeah.
But don't forget, affordable for many years wasn't even something that many people even knew about.
Right.
Okay, so
Until
like
they
you
made
said,
it
we have
mandatory.
mutual friends that have been doing it for 25 and 30 years, and that's all they do today.
Right.
Which now they're like almost like rock stars in a sense because
You're right.
they have the experience.
have the niche.
They have the experience. They know the entire structure. They know exactly how it all works. They know how to put it together. They know what everybody's looking for. And it's changed for them a lot also.
But
with
Anthony, one of the things
lately,
that
too.
they know, and and I know, is that it's not the same as working for a private developer. You got to finance the project. You got to wait for your funding sometimes. We do some work right now in the in the affordable world where we do the whole project until they close with the state.
Yeah.
We don't get paid. We fund it for 6-7 months sometimes a year.
It's even longer. It's even
Yeah,
longer now.
but a lot of people won't do that. They won't get into that market. We understand it, and we know how to price it so that we can still be competitive. We can support our clients. We feel that it's a great place to do because we help a lot of people. You know, a lot of these people are in tough shape, and building those projects, there's a lot of satisfaction in them too. You know, I think that I think this energy thing is going to make its way out. You know, 5 or 6 years as we get closer to the deadline, we're going to see. I think it's going to change, honestly. I think it's a little too strict right now from everyone.
Well, it's very aggressive. But, you know, like I said, I did a couple of those jobs a couple of years back, and I guess these owners and landlords were ahead of their time. And I guess maybe it was just an opportunist at the time to say, hey, we have a building that we can more or less...
we can say is
ready to
energy
go
efficient.
and energy efficient. And we also had, you know, a lot of people coming out of these older buildings, and they just weren't putting people back in these apartments, letting them go.
And I think the quality of life in the apartments are much better too.
Yeah, well, listen, some of these buildings, what they turn them into, it's amazing. What you could even see what they turned some of these spaces into that look like old boiler rooms, but now look like all kinds of beautiful, fancy amenity spaces.
You're right, and they took something that was terrible. But we'll end the show on some thought that you and I probably know for sure. But I do remember going to my mother-in-law's, and she lived in an apartment building, and she lived on the second floor. Tony Ann's mom, Dolly, and I used to go in the middle of the winter with shorts and a T-shirt on because whenever we had a holiday, it was so hot. It was like a sauna. So we talk about quality of life. She lived there. So in the winter, I don't know how the woman slept. It was so hot. All the windows would be open. People would be sweating. And we'd all be like we were dressed in the middle of the summer in a heat wave. And it was the middle of January and it was 0 out. So we know that these energy laws are going to make a better quality of life and make better apartments. And you're part of that.
Yeah,
you know, using the right equipment, suggesting the right stuff to the developers, and making their experience better. You know, so there is a positive. But we all had an apartment like that.
Oh,
Went to
my
visit
mom
our
used to go
aunts.
around at night and close the valves on the radiators. When we were sleeping, I would wake up and like, what happened? It's freezing in here now. Oh, it was too hot in here, so I shut the radiators. I'm like, oh, okay. So
Everybody on the podcast who watches this is going to relate to that
exactly.
moment.
Or they open the windows.
Anthony, what a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you for coming
Thank
in.
you for
You
having
did a
me.
great
Appreciate
job.
it. Thank you.